A decision in a Washington, D.C. courtroom has sent shockwaves worldwide. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down the Trump-era tariffs, a move that will reshape the price of goods, jobs, and global relationships. Financial markets reacted instantly. Tokyo's Nikkei surged, Berlin's automakers exhaled, and Beijing watched closely. The tariffs, once a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy, are now unconstitutional. This marks a turning point, forcing a global re-evaluation of trade strategies and alliances. For years, uncertainty clouded investments and supply chains, hurting farmers and businesses alike. Now, the Supreme Court's decision signals the end of unpredictable trade actions, offering hope for stability, but demanding major adjustments. The world must now rebuild relationships fractured by years of economic conflict, as the real-world consequences of this ruling begin to unfold. To truly understand today's Supreme Court ruling and its far-reaching implications, we need to rewind to the pivotal year of 2018, when the Trump administration dramatically shifted the direction of U.S. trade policy, setting off a chain reaction that would reverberate around the globe. Citing national security concerns and what it called unfair trade practices, the administration imposed sweeping tariffs on steel, aluminum, and a vast array of Chinese imports, affecting hundreds of billions of dollars in goods. The stated goal was clear: to revive American manufacturing, protect domestic jobs, and pressure China to fundamentally change its economic behavior and trade practices. In response, America's trading partners didn't sit idly by. They retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting iconic U.S. exports like soybeans, bourbon, and motorcycles, hitting American farmers and manufacturers hard. What began as a series of targeted tariffs quickly spiraled into a full-blown global trade war, disrupting supply chains, shaking financial markets, and straining international alliances. Businesses scrambled to adapt. Some shifted manufacturing out of China to avoid tariffs, while others had no choice but to pass higher costs onto American consumers, leading to rising prices on everyday goods. The tariffs became a constant source of tension, not just with traditional rivals like China, but also with close allies in Europe and North America, fundamentally altering the landscape of global cooperation and trust. For years, companies and workers across the country navigated a chaotic, unpredictable environment, facing uncertainty about costs, supply chains, and the future of their industries. The trade war became a defining feature of the global economy, entangling every continent and affecting the daily lives of millions of people worldwide. Today's Supreme Court decision marks the end of that turbulent era, closing a significant chapter in trade history, but its legacy, both the challenges and the lessons learned, will continue to shape global commerce for years to come. Now, the world faces the daunting challenge of rebuilding trust, restoring stability, and forging new paths forward in international trade and economic cooperation. The battle over tariffs quickly moved from markets to courtrooms. American businesses and industry groups sued, arguing the president had overstepped constitutional bounds. Congress, not the president, controls trade. Legal challenges wound through lower courts, with many judges deferring to executive authority on national security. The turning point came when the Supreme Court agreed to hear a consolidated case, American Institute for International Steel vs. United States. Plaintiffs argued the tariffs were an unchecked use of power, far beyond what Congress intended. The stakes, not just billions in tariffs, but the very balance of power between Congress and the president. The world watched as the Supreme Court prepared to decide who truly controls America's trade policy. On August 14, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a unanimous 9-0 decision against the executive branch. The court ruled the tariffs exceeded presidential authority and reaffirmed Congress's primary role in regulating foreign commerce. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that, while Congress can delegate some powers, it cannot hand over its core constitutional duties. The court found the administration's use of national security was overly broad, allowing tariffs for economic reasons rather than true threats. The ruling immediately invalidates the steel, aluminum, and China tariffs and opens the door for billions in refunds to affected companies. The message, the separation of powers, is not optional, and future presidents cannot wield unchecked economic power. America's tariff regime, a source of global friction, has been dismantled by the highest court. The court's opinion was heavily focused on the non-delegation doctrine, which is a fundamental principle stating that Congress cannot hand off its essential legislative powers to another branch of government. This doctrine ensures that the separation of powers is maintained, preventing any one branch from becoming too powerful. Chief Justice Roberts emphasized this by writing, "National security cannot become a blank check for broad economic policy." His words highlight the importance of maintaining clear boundaries between national security measures and economic policy decisions. The justices made a clear distinction between targeted actions, which are specific and limited, and the sweeping, long-term tariffs that were imposed, which they found to be overly broad and not in line with legislative intent. Regarding the China tariffs, the court stated, "Imposing duties on hundreds of billions in goods is not mere execution of law, it is the creation of law." This statement underscores the court's view that such actions go beyond mere enforcement and enter the realm of lawmaking. The court made it clear that if Congress wants the president to have such expansive power, it must grant it clearly and specifically, which in this case, it did not. This lack of clear delegation was a central issue in the court's decision. Justice Kagan added a crucial perspective, stating, "The Constitution is designed to prevent the concentration of power. The tariff regime at issue is exactly what the framers sought to avoid." Her words remind us of the framers' intent to distribute power to protect individual liberties. The court did not judge the wisdom or effectiveness of the tariffs themselves, but rather focused on who has the rightful authority to impose them, reinforcing the importance of adhering to constitutional principles. The unanimous decision serves as a strong rebuke of executive overreach and stands as a landmark ruling for the separation of powers, reinforcing the checks and balances system. The Constitution's division of power, the court affirmed, is a vital protection of liberty, ensuring that no single branch can dominate the others, thus safeguarding democratic governance. The Supreme Court's decision triggered a global economic chain reaction. With tariffs gone, companies may shift production back to China or established hubs, unwinding years of costly supply chain changes. The removal of tariffs is a major olive branch to allies like Canada, Mexico, and the EU, paving the way for renewed cooperation. With China, the landscape shifts. Disputes remain, but negotiations will now be less combative. Financial markets surged, anticipating lower costs and smoother trade. U.S. industries reliant on imports, electronics, autos, construction, stand to benefit, while domestic steel and aluminum face renewed competition. The ruling pushes back against the weaponization of trade, signaling that broad economic measures now require congressional consensus. This could foster a return to a more stable, rules-based trading system. The memory of the tariff wars lingers, but the path forward is more predictable. The world must now adapt to a new era of global commerce. The Supreme Court's decision will be felt in wallets and workplaces across America. With tariffs gone, prices on everyday goods, furniture, electronics, clothing, are expected to fall as import costs drop. Workers in industries using imported materials may see job growth and greater security, while logistics sectors could benefit from increased trade. However, domestic steel and aluminum workers face renewed competition and possible job losses as protections vanish. The ruling shifts the U.S. from protectionism to open competition, creating both opportunities and challenges. Consumers gain more choice and lower prices, but some workers will need new support. The decision underscores how deeply global trade policy shapes daily life. Economists and legal scholars are now deeply engaged in parsing the long-term impact of this historic ruling, examining not only its immediate effects, but also its broader implications for the future of trade and governance in the United States. Many experts hail the decision as a major victory for consumers and global economic growth, predicting that it will lead to lower prices, reduced inflation, and a surge of renewed investment both at home and abroad. They argue that with fewer trade barriers, businesses can expand more freely, and consumers will benefit from greater choice and affordability. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a leading economist, calls it a return to sanity, emphasizing that the move restores predictability and stability to international markets, which she believes is essential for long-term prosperity. However, not everyone is optimistic. Some analysts warn that removing tariffs without simultaneously introducing a new robust industrial strategy could leave U.S. manufacturing vulnerable, potentially leading to job losses and further factory closures in key sectors. Michael Chen, another prominent voice, cautions, "We risk exposing domestic producers to the same subsidized competition that hollowed out our base in the past." He stresses the need for careful policy planning to avoid repeating previous mistakes. Legal experts, meanwhile, see the decision as a landmark reaffirmation of the separation of powers, underscoring the importance of checks and balances in the American system of government. Professor David Allen notes, "This is the court drawing a firm line. Future presidents can't use vague laws for sweeping economic policy." He believes this sets a precedent that will shape executive authority for years to come. On the geopolitical front, the U.S. now has an opportunity to reset relations with key allies, opening the door to new trade agreements and diplomatic initiatives that could strengthen international partnerships. However, the country also loses a blunt tool in its ongoing rivalry with China, making future negotiations more complex and requiring more nuanced strategies. Jane Fulton, a respected policy analyst, says, "The era of the tariff hammer is over. Now comes the diplomatic scalpel." She suggests that the U.S. must now rely on more sophisticated, targeted approaches to achieve its economic and strategic goals. The challenge for Congress is clear: craft smarter, more targeted policies that can effectively support American workers and industries in this new environment, while also maintaining competitiveness on the global stage. As the world enters a new phase of trade, shaped by law, diplomacy, and economic strategy, the decisions made today will echo for generations, influencing the direction of global commerce and the prosperity of nations. The Supreme Court's decision closes a turbulent chapter in global trade history. The era of executive-driven trade wars is over. Congress now holds the reins. Markets and importers welcome the promise of lower costs and stability. Yet, American industries once protected by tariffs face tough competition and need new strategies. Disputes with China persist, but must now be addressed through diplomacy and legislation. For citizens, it's a chance to engage with how trade policy shapes daily life. The court handed responsibility back to Congress, underscoring the importance of checks and balances. As the dust settles, a new era begins, one of stability, lower prices, and the hope for stronger alliances.